For thread, I got mono. I have monofilament thread in black. And I want to show you quickly what I would say is a proper thread base. You don't have to do this to the extreme, but I will say this is the best method. So when you're starting your thread, and it's entertaining to me because my 5-year-old ties, and he's tied with me for like 2 or 3 years, and he always struggles with starting his thread, right? But I'm going to wrap. I'm going to start towards the hook eye, and I'm going to take a few wraps forward, like all the way up to the hook eye, and then I'm just going to wrap back over to that tag end, and I'm going to do something here that I would say I'm going to lock my bobbin, and I'm going to pull to the maximum elasticity of that thread. Now if you see the nose of my bobbin and my thread, they make a perfect line. My bobbin is pointed at my thread. It's pointed at the hook in the same directionality that that thread is going. So that, because this is the opposite, right? A lot of people, because you tie 90 degrees, they pull 90 degrees. And the moment you do that, you're isolating all the force at the tip of the bobbin nose, which is very easy to break the thread. But you can also gouge the nose of your bobbin, depending on the thread you use. Right, so this will score and ruin your bobbin the moment you tie like this with a really intense thread. But you alleviate all the pressure from the bobbin. It goes straight to the spool, which my hand is able to grip and lock in place so that it's not able to spin. And so I can take that thread to its elastic limit, and I've exerted maximum pressure, and I'm also familiarizing myself with the elasticity of that thread, which I've already explained is critically important for being able to remove slack and tie within that perfect pressure application. Now I'm going to take that tag end, because I'm going to assume not everybody has mono, and I'm going to take it all the way to the back. And let's say every 10 wraps or so, I'm going to suck it out, and I'm going to do that locking thread turn where I draw everything out of there and bind that to the steel to the best of my ability. Now something I'm not explaining has to do with your bobbin. So if you look at a bobbin kind of fundamentally, you have this spring steel legs, right? There's 2 legs that are inside of the diameter of a spool, so that when you put the spool in, the legs are forced open. These nylon ears, which seat inside the nylon circles of that spool, simply provide rotational friction to resist, right? Now you can bend these to make them higher friction. You can loosen them up if you want less, but one of the best things you can learn to do is just like feathering a reel kind of when you cast, right? So that it goes out nice and smooth and taut, lands perfectly straight so that you can begin your retrieve immediately. You're going to feather that spool with your fingers. You're going to use your fingers to increase the tension as you tie, because this base has to be perfect. And if I just let this friction, if that's the only friction I use, that's not enough. That is not enough friction to trap anything down. So when my hand rests on this, these fingers are grazing this and they're applying pressure. Now we've gone from the hook eye to the bend. That's wonderful. Most people would start tying right here. But we do have the advantage of an elastic thread. But if I just kind of relax, this is only one layer, the one layer against the steel. And there's nothing stopping this layer from simply backing off and relieving the pressure that it's under. But if I can take this layer, and I call this Chinese finger trapping, but I'm going to section over the top of that all the way back to the hook eye, and I'm going to section all the way back. And this is going to serve a huge purpose as soon as we start tying, because most people will tie in a material and that's it. They tie in a material and then they let their bobbin hang, but a bobbin's not very heavy. And if that material has any sort of springiness to it or trapped air to it, which bucktail does have, it'll push the thread out. It'll open the thread up. But this Chinese finger trap, so you lay down a layer, but then you go forward and backwards, right? You put a secondary and thirdary layer, don't know if that's a word, whatever, but you put those double layers on top of it in these kind of crisscross patterns so that the underneath layer is trapped to perfection. And it's super important because I'm going to teach you how to tie very cleanly with minimal thread wraps with super high pressure to create maximum durability. And it's not going to be messy. It's not going to take up space. Everything is going to be clean so that you can build the profiles you want. So this is what I'd argue is a perfect thread base. You can super glue that if you need to, and something you should be able to hear and see. Can you hear that? Does that come across on the mic? This is crazy high friction. So not only is it bound to seal the hook, but when I take material to it, so that inner thread base cannot slide forward and backwards on that hook, but this top layer has so much grip and bite and grab that the material, when it's put on it, isn't going to slide against that thread. It's a very good reason to use round thread. It creates a very rough surface that has ridges and bumps within it, and it's just creating friction. You're creating a higher friction. You try to put that on smooth, right? You tie marabou on something smooth and you can just slip the marabou. It's not going to do anything for you. So I talked about increasing thread pressure, and I also want to teach you how to tie with less pressure than what this is capable of. And the reason you do this is for control. So in a lot of times when you're tying, you will tie something in, then you will control it. And the big problem is a lot of times when people try to control something, they tie it in while they do it, and the material rolls, it shifts, or it reflares. So you need to be able to tie fundamentally both with exceedingly great pressure, but you need to be able to tie with less pressure without the introduction of slack, which is really, really technical to do. So I'm going to take some bucktail here so that we have an actual real-world example. This, by the way, is pristine and beautiful, and I will probably fondle this. So I was in my office, and I probably have like 500 bucktails in this thing behind me, and I was sorting them, and I found this one, and I forgot that I had it. And my wife was in here, and she saw my face, and she's like, "Oh my goodness, you look like such an idiot." Well, she was nicer than that, I'm paraphrasing. But I was like flabbergasted by this tail, and I was just touching it like I am now. And so you won't learn to appreciate this, but after you've been through about 100 of these bad boys, maybe 200 of them, this is the most precious commodity within fly tying. It's seriously unique to nature. We will talk about bucktail here in a second, but I'm going to take a pinch so that we can finish this thread control stuff. So don't worry about what I'm doing here. This is for a later topic in about 10 or 15 minutes if I ever get to it. So tying with less pressure. Close your eyes. This is not important. Nobody focus. We're going to do literally the same thing, but I'm going to explain everything I just did here in a second. So what you can see, one, that took up no room whatsoever. It's super clean, very precise, infinitely durable. I mean, unless a teeth comes in and cuts that fiber, it ain't going anywhere. But you can see it's kind of gnarly. Now for anywhere else on the fly, whatever, let it flare, get the volume out of the hair, it's only going to benefit you. But for the tail, a lot of times you want to slink it back, or if you're doing a hollow tie, you want to control it. If you're doing a bulkhead, you want to control it. If you're tying in feathers, you want to first tie them in and then control them, right? So the only difference between what I'm going to show you and a fly like this, which is just like a beautiful, elegant, classic featherwing style fly, is control. All you do is put in extra layers and control the feathers to create your silhouette. There's the only difference. Literally, if you follow these instructions to the end of this lesson, there's no reason you can't tie this fly right now. Well, at the end of this, not right now, but at the end of this. There's no reason you can't literally jump into that level of tying very, very quickly. But you have to be able to control. So we have the minimum tension being supplied by the bobbin. In order to tie less than that, I have to pull my bobbin away from the hook. I have to, let me reset my camera real quick. There you go. So I have to be able to pull that bobbin away from the hook. I created longer thread than what I needed. Now I'm going to lock the thread because I'm not engaging the tension of that bobbin. I'm not using the bobbin, so I have it locked. This is where drawing a perfect circle becomes so important, because if I make a mistake now, there's slack in the control. And so I'm going to tie with light pressure, but I'm always going to feel that circle. And what you're going to see is my bobbin is going to get closer to that hook, closer to the hook, closer to the hook, because I have this huge circumference of bucktail eating up all of the thread that I pulled out. And if I take it, say, to here, so I have this beautiful slicked back low profile tail that's ultimately controlled. If I were to tie with the pressure of my bobbin, I just ruined everything. I just did. Did you see it? The pressure of my bobbin was so high that I re-engaged the compressible nature of the fiber. I reflared everything I was trying to control. So this ability to back off the thread, take out more than what you need, lock it, and then let the circumference of the material eat it up, come back onto your base, and then lock it in place is how you essentially control everything you're trying to do. So you have your kind of set wraps, which we're about to go over, and you have control wraps. Tying with less pressure is all about control.